Your response to today's judgment?
Well, the judgment absolutely vindicates the Maritime Union and the Australian Maritime Officers Union and the Senate in this country, who took a decision to reject the regulations that the government were bringing in. So it's a fantastic outcome.
What's so bad about the way the government went about this?
Well, first and foremost, they had no regard to what the real circumstances were in the offshore oil and gas industry in regards to skills shortages. They didn't want to consult with those who do know, and that's us, the workforce representatives and the employers and others. They just disregarded the democracy of the upper house, the Senate.
What happens to these workers now? There's what, some almost 400, is that right?
There'll be upwards of 400 that are out there now, potentially working illegally in this country. We're not looking to hold this removal out of the country for them, but something has to be put into place to protect those workers, to make sure they're being paid Australian rates of pay, and most importantly, make sure they are legitimately here in Australia filling shortage of skills, and we don't believe that's the case.
What sort of arrangements are they on now? What are they being paid? What sort of conditions? How is that being determined at the moment?
Well, I don't think there's any way of knowing that unless people come and complain with you. And there has been media around Chinese and Japanese workers that have received $400,000 in back pay where they were exploited by construction. So it's very hard to work out, but I know for a fact that they are being paid under the award or EBA rates. So we put a message out to the government now. Here's your opportunity for you to sit down with the unions and employers and develop a migration and work visa network and system that is robust, that does not exploit those workers, that does have regard to serious and real short-term needs and skills in the offshore, not to just have this open slather where employers will use the lowest common denominator to exploit these workers, and those workers in turn exploiting Australian workers.
Presumably the government brought this in because the companies believed that Australia was at some sort of competitive disadvantage with the system that existed up until that time. Is this going to place undue pressure on the companies that are operating these facilities?
Not at all. In fact, the peak bodies of some of those offshore companies are the ones that have been running this political ideology. It's not the companies themselves. The companies have a business model of which they provide labour, Australian labour, that is available to work, that is skilled, competent and licensed. So therefore there is plenty of Australian workers that are available to fill these positions. It is about exploitive employers and employer associations who want to go and get a cheaper margin, cheaper options that they can, and get foreign workers from those cheap labour supplying countries.
Was the biggest problem with this instrument that it actually went against the intent of the legislation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly the way that Senator Cash dealt with it, and that was just to dismiss the Senate and have nothing to do with it.
Is there any, I mean, I suppose you don't know yet, but is there any prospect that the government might try to appeal this judgment?
Knowing this government, I wouldn't rule that out. I think there's a big chance they'll go to the High Court, and they'll probably get done again there.
Putting that aside for a moment though, what would you like to see happen now in terms of this workforce and how the government moves forward?
Well, we'll challenge the government right now to sit down with us and other interested parties who have a stake in this business, in the offshore oil and gas industry, to work through what is the needs for short-term skills in this field, and how do we provide those skills needed. How do we make sure that we're not throwing workers that are available for work, skilled and competent, on the rubbish heap? They've got to be looked after first, and then we'll work out how we get these visas to work in the interest of keeping the industry turning over, making sure that those workers that have come out as guest workers are paid the same rates of pay that Australians are, and treated properly.